Hey Justin, how are you doing? Justin, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I know it's been a while since we spoke last, and I'm looking forward to this presentation, this webinar a lot. So let's start off. I'll just share my screen, and I'll walk you guys through the entire webinar and over the agenda. Just give me a second. Justin, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Guys, thanks a lot for logging in today. We've got some good news. We've got over 600 registrations. And the folk at Vtiger, we appreciate you taking time off on a weekday to be with us. Today's webinar is going to be about death of field sales. It's quite an interesting topic that we're going to be covering with Justin. And in the webinar today, Justin is going to speak about why the standard sales process is broken, in how you can restructure your sales team and process to reduce costs, increase appointments, and ultimately boost sales volumes. So Justin, again, he's one of sales influencers. He's got over 20 years of experience in sales. He's led teams of over 100 salespeople. In addition to that, Justin is currently the founder of Ballistics, which is a consulting company that re-engineers sales processes for manufacturing and technology companies. He also happens to be the author of The Machine, which is a very important book in sales. And if I'm not wrong, it won gold at the sales category in the Axiom Book Award. So it's safe to say that the knowledge that Justin will impart today is well tested and insightful. So going on, I will just cover the agenda of the entire webinar now. So we have a quick brief on Vtiger for people who are new here. After that, Justin is going to give you a deep dive on the crux of their webinar, and then we'll have a Q&A session. And as a thank you note, we're also giving away a chapter of Justin's book. Now, for people who are new here, I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain about Vtiger. We were founded in 2004, and back in the day, we launched the open source CRM. And at the moment, we've got over 5 million downloads, and that makes us the #1 open source CRM in the world. And in 2010, with the cloud revolution, we realized that we could add much more value to our customers with continuous improvements on the cloud model. That's when we launched the on-demand version. And at the moment, we've got 3 offices globally and over 300,000 happy users. And we've also been awarded by Gartner, G2 Crowd, GetApp, and a couple of other research agencies. We recently won the Gartner's Customer Choice Award for Salesforce Automation, and we're also the leader in the G2 Crowd Spring Awards in the All-in-One CRM category. So this is just a brief on Vtiger. I think, Justin, I'll hand over the mic to you, where you can take our attendees through the death of field sales and how they can improve their sales processes.
Excellent, thank you. So let me just share my screen here real quick. And are you guys seeing my screen now? You are, excellent, excellent. Okay, so this morning's presentation is entitled The Death of Field Sales. It's a controversial title, deliberately so. I'm not arguing for the death of salespeople, obviously. What I'm arguing is that it's time that we stopped thinking about sales as essentially a field function, a field activity, and started to think about sales as essentially an inside activity. So it's true that, and we'll talk about this in detail, it's true that there is a requirement still in sales environments for face-to-face meetings of various types. But the days are long behind us where it made sense for us to think of sales as essentially something that happens in the field. That's simply not the case. And if we reach the point where we're prepared to acknowledge that sales is no longer essentially a field activity and is now essentially an inside activity, then that has profound implications for how we design sales and how we manage the sales function. And that's the journey that I want to take you on this morning. And what I'm going to lead you to is a radically different way of designing and a radically different way of managing the sales function. So let's get started. A good starting point, I guess, is to check to see if there's anything fundamentally wrong with sales, because if there's not, we can call a halt to this and you can go back to your early morning coffee or late evening coffee, perhaps in India. So I haven't spent a lot of time in India, at least with sales functions. But certainly in every other region that I've visited, and maybe someone can talk about the differences in India in question time, in every other region that I've visited, when I spend time with companies, it really doesn't matter the industry. It really doesn't matter whether they're selling products or services. We hear the same list of complaints about the sales function. Here's a handful of them here. Salespeople average just a couple of true sales meetings a week. Salespeople are up to their elbows in customer service. Salespeople over-service some accounts and essentially ignore others. We have friction between sales and other departments, and salespeople don't prospect nearly enough. So the interesting thing about these concerns is not only are they the same from organization to organization, but I've been hearing the same concerns for the last 22 years, and they haven't changed much. So that, I think, is reasonable evidence that there is something fundamentally wrong with sales. Because if the problem wasn't fundamental in nature, you would think in 22 years, somebody would have figured out how to fix these issues. So my theory is that all of these issues are the consequences of a root cause. And the root cause is that salespeople own accounts and operate autonomously. And really, I'm saying the same thing here with these two phrases. I'm saying that the root cause is that salespeople are essentially autonomous agents. So let's check that in two passes. Let's first check that that statement is correct, the one on the left. And then let's check to see that salespeople's autonomous mode of operation does in fact contribute to these undesirable effects on the right. So is it true that salespeople operate as autonomous agents? So in most sales environments, salespeople get paid on a commission basis, what we would in manufacturing call a piece rate of pay. In other words, if they do a piece of work or if they produce a unit of output, they get a unit of pay. In addition to that, when we engage with salespeople, we have a habit of saying to them, these are your accounts. This is your territory. And some managers are even more explicit than that. They will recruit salespeople and they will say to them, we want you to run your basket of accounts or your territory as if it were your own business. So I think how we pay people, how we talk to people, and how salespeople operate, all of those are quite strong indicators of the fact that both salespeople and their managers think of salespeople as being autonomous. And what I mean by autonomous is they march to their own drumbeat. Now, I'm not arguing that there's anything wrong with autonomy. Certainly degrees of autonomy are good. Even if we have a person answering the phone in reception in our office, we want that person to have some degree of autonomy. But there's a difference between a person with autonomy and a person who is autonomous. A person who's autonomous marches to their own drumbeat. And if you think about it, that's unusual, that's peculiar to salespeople. There's in the modern organization, there's really no one else who marches to the beat of their own drum. In the modern organization, all of our other team members march to the beat of their departmental drums. Now, is there a connection between salespeople's autonomous mode of operation and some of these or all of these undesirable effects? Well, let's look at a couple. Salespeople are up to their elbows in customer service. Well, why is that? Well, it's because salespeople believe that they own accounts, and it's because they operate autonomously. Really the same thing. For that reason, salespeople have a very, very strong tendency to monopolize the relationship between their accounts, in scare quotes, and the organization. And the consequence of that is they end up deeply involved in customer service. That involvement in customer service limits the amount of time salespeople have to pay to prospecting down the bottom here, and it limits the amount of time that they have available to focus on business development or sales at the top here. If we look at a couple of others, salespeople over-service some accounts and ignore others. Can that be connected? Well, I think it can. The reason for that is if you pay someone on a piece rate, if you pay them commission, in other words, what you do is you incentivize them to focus on the short term and focus on the certain. And it makes sense if salespeople perceive that they own accounts, that they will pay a lot of attention to existing accounts, particularly the accounts that spend a lot of money. And that's because the revenue that comes from those accounts is certain, and it arrives in the short term. So there's a fast, certain payback. Now, of course, paying attention to or performing activities that generate a fast, certain payback is the opposite of what we would really like salespeople to be doing if we want to grow the business. The nature of sales is that we need to focus on activities that have an uncertain payoff and activities that yield a longer term payback. So if it's true that salespeople operate autonomously and that salespeople's autonomous mode of operation produces these negative consequences, it prompts us to ask a pretty obvious question. And that question is, well, why do we structure salespeople's involvement or relationship with the organization in this way? Because we don't do this for anyone else in the organization. If somebody joins our marketing team, or if they join our manufacturing group, or if they join the finance department or any other department in the organization, people get paid salaries. They march to the beat of the department of which they're a member. And we don't have undesirable effects that look like the ones we see in sales. Well, I think there are two assumptions about sales that were true in the past that were no longer true today. So I'm going to talk about those assumptions, and then I'm going to suggest that we question them and replace them with two new assumptions that are correct today. So the first assumption is that sales is an outside activity. And I think it's fair to say that most executives simply assume this. It's a default assumption. It's almost treated as if it's an axiom. Folks don't question it. And certainly it was true in the past that sales was an outside activity. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but there's a movie about the founder of McDonald's, Ray Kroc. It's called Founder, appropriately enough. And it's a great movie because it paints a picture of what sales used to be like. And when you watch that movie, you see in the opening scenes Ray Kroc driving around with a Mixmaster machine in the trunk of his car, going from hamburger stand to hamburger stand, showing these machines and attempting to sell these machines to hamburger restaurants. And the movie is illustrative because it paints a picture of what sales used to be like, in the 50s, I guess. And that was when sales evolved. And sales hasn't really changed that much since then. And certainly back then, sales was an outside activity. If we were the Mixmaster Corporation and we manufactured these machines, we needed salespeople to put them in the trunks of their cars and drive around the length and the breadth of America, showing off these machines to operators of hamburger restaurants. Because if we didn't send salespeople out in the field in their cars, there was no other way for us to communicate with existing and potential customers. So back then, sales was an outside activity because our customers were outside, and because if we wanted to communicate with them, we had to send salespeople into the field where customers were. Of course, that's not true today. If we think about what's happened in the last 20 or 30 years, we've seen a number of revolutions, all of which are technology-based, that have essentially conspired to put us in a position where it no longer makes sense to think of our customers as being outside. The first of those revolutions was a piece of technology called the PBX, the Private Branch Exchange. And the PBX enables folks to call on the telephone individuals in our organizations. Prior to the PBX, if somebody wanted to talk to someone inside an organization, they had to call the front desk, and an operator used to have to sit there with patch cables, physically patching callers through to individuals in the organization. And the consequence of that expensive setup was that only senior executives had direct lines. Now, of course, everyone in an organization has a direct line and is accessible to the outside world. The next big revolution was fax machines. Fax machines were incredible at the time because they enabled us to send not just words, but pictures in real time to people inside organizations. And vice versa, from people in organizations to customers out there in the field. And then, of course, we have the more recent technology revolution that's provided us with email, with video conferences like this, with websites. And the significance of websites is that most of us have gone to a significant amount of effort to figuratively invite our customers into our organizations. Most of us enable our customers to log in, to look at inventory levels, to look at the status of orders, to download CAD drawings if we're in a technical environment. Most of us have gone to significant trouble to put customers in a position where they're no longer outside the organization, they're inside. And of course, the pendulum has swung so far that if today you have salespeople outside, you will probably find that your salespeople in the field are more disconnected from your organization than your customers are. Because in the time it takes a salesperson to drive across the city to meet with a customer, that customer has spent 45 minutes on your website, reading up on your product's technical specifications and downloading CAD files. The second traditional assumption is that sales is an individual pursuit. And if we go back to Ray Kroc with his Mixmaster machine, we realize that back in the 50s, the standard configuration of industry was make to stock. So the Mixmaster Corporation made those machines and they put them in inventory, and Ray Kroc would come and take one or two out of inventory and load them into the trunk of his car. But the configuration of industry has migrated over the years since then, away from make to stock and towards what are called make to order, and then ultimately engineer to order. So it's common today that if a salesperson is taking an order, the thing that the customer is ordering doesn't exist at the time that the order is being placed. And there's two reasons for that. One reason for it is that it hasn't been manufactured yet. So it might be that we're working for an organization like Dell, who only go about assembling machines at the point at which the order is received. Or it might be that we're in a service organization, meaning that we go about delivering the product that's been ordered at the point at which the order is received. And some organizations have migrated even further to what's called an engineer-to-order configuration. And in an engineer-to-order environment, what that means is we don't even start to design the product or service that our customer has ordered until the order has been received. Now, the consequence of this migration is that the salesperson can no longer drive around with a product in the trunk of their car demoing it because it hasn't been built yet, or perhaps it hasn't even been engineered yet. And what that means is that sales is no longer an individual pursuit. A salesperson can't make a sale of their own volition in most cases. In most cases, sales is a team pursuit today. In most cases, for you to create a sale in any meaningful sense, if you're a salesperson, you need the involvement of engineering and you need the involvement of production. And increasingly, what we see is the level of service provided to customers is to a large part a function of the quality of integration between the sales department and the engineering and production departments. And therefore, if we want to improve customer care, it's necessary for us to no longer think of salespeople as autonomous agents. We need to think of them as members of tightly integrated teams. So I'm suggesting that we redesign the sales function based upon two new assumptions. The first is that today, whether we like it or not, sales is primarily an inside function. We can't turn the clock back. We've already invited customers into our organizations and they're not going to leave. The second assumption is that sales, whether we like it or not, is a team endeavor. You know, customers would much rather transact in most cases with organizations that are configuring their products to order, or perhaps even engineering their products to order, and we can't turn back the clock on that. Whether we like it or not, sales today is a team sport. So what I'd like to do is to perform a thought experiment here. If we were a smaller group, I'd ask you to put up your hands and answer my questions, but that's not practical. So I'm going to try and walk you through this and preempt your questions as best I can. But the idea of the thought experiment is that we're going to pretend that we work for a reasonable sized business, let's say a $20 million business, And we're going to pretend that as a consequence of some catastrophic event, we've lost our sales function and our customer service team and everybody else who's involved with sales. So we're going to pretend that we come to work on a Monday morning and everything about the business is the same as it was on Friday, except we're missing salespeople, we're missing customer service people, and we're missing anyone in marketing or engineering that was involved in sales previously. And we're going to think about, well, what would we do if we found ourselves in that situation? So the idea is we arrive at work Monday morning, and we, for the purpose of this exercise, are members of the executive team, let's assume. So we arrive at work Monday morning, we unlock the door. The first thing that we notice is that there are a whole bunch of empty seats. Our salespeople are missing, our customer service team are missing, and there are a whole bunch of members of our marketing and engineering teams that are missing as well. And we observe that our business, aside from that, is similar to how it was on Friday afternoon. We're disappointed that we're missing all these people, and we straight away realize that we're no longer a $20 million business because without salespeople, we don't have anyone out in the field hunting for new deals. But the good news is our revenue hasn't dropped to zero. The reason it hasn't dropped to zero is that we have a certain amount of volume that comes in via EDI, so electronic transactions and e-commerce. Maybe that's $5 million. And we have another, maybe we have another bunch of revenue that doesn't require salespeople's active involvement to generate it. And fortunately, that's a decent chunk of our revenue. And we know that that revenue exists because we can see that the phones are ringing and emails are coming in. It's just that we're not answering the phone or responding to those emails. But we can see when we listen to the telephone and look at the inboxes of our missing team members that there's a whole bunch of people there trying to give us money. Now, it turns out if we were a $20 million business on Friday, this morning on Monday, we're probably still a $17 million business, or maybe a $16 million business, because most of our revenue is repeat revenue. Only a small percentage is net new business that is procured by salespeople. So, of course, the first order of business for us on Monday morning is to figure out how to answer those inbound calls and respond to those inbound emails. Because if we don't, the only revenue that we're going to be left with is e-commerce. And that's not enough to keep the lights on. So we convene a meeting in the boardroom, we invite HR along, and we say to our HR department, look, we desperately need to add some people. And the rules of this thought experiment are that we can only add one person at a time, and that there's a delay in between hires. So we think about it and we talk to HR and we conclude that the very first person that we have to add is not actually a salesperson at all. The very first person that we have to add to our organization is a customer service rep. And we don't have any choice in this. You see, we have, aside from e-commerce, we have about $15 million a year in revenue that's trying to come in. And unless we have customer service reps to answer the phone and respond to emails, we will go out of business very, very shortly. So on day one, we don't need salespeople. We desperately need customer service reps. So we say to our HR department, find us some people that we can use to repopulate our customer service department. So on day one, fortunately, our HR department finds us a person. We make that person a customer service rep. And that first hire, our customer service rep, is going to be responsible for simply picking the low-hanging fruit, to use a metaphor. This person is going to be responsible for processing inbound orders, for generating inbound requests for quotes, and for processing it. What we're doing is we're grouping together all of the transactional tasks, all of the tasks that need to be performed in this, and we're allocating it to the customer service team. And in time, we're going to add another person to that team and then another. And what we're probably going to find is that we need to build a team of about 4 to 5 people in order to be able to process about $15 million worth of inbound transactional business. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to keep on have a robust team with the necessary capability and the necessary capacity to process all of our inbound orders, to generate all of the quotes that are requested, and to resolve any issues, answer technical questions and the like. So we have, a robust customer service team. And let's imagine that at that point we stop and we survey some customers and we ask customers, existing customers, not potential customers, but we asked if existing customers, are we easier to deal with today than we were previously? And the interesting point about this question is that we probably have to conclude that our customers are going to answer in the positive. Yes, you're much easier to transact with than you were previously. Why is that the case? Well, it's because previously, if customers had orders or quotes, a requirement for quotes or issues, they were in most, if not all cases, having to talk to salespeople. And the truth where salespeople are concerned is that salespeople were going to extraordinary effort historically to provide for customers terrible customer service. It's not that salespeople didn't care about customers, they did. It's that salespeople were not in a position to offer great customer service. They were in the field, they were being pulled in numerous directions simultaneously, they weren't sitting in front of ERP with a headset on. They were absolutely not in a position to perform good customer service. The new customer service team that we've built is the opposite in every case. They're sitting in front of ERP, they have headsets on, they are focused on processing just these three tasks: orders, quotes, and issues, and doing it expeditiously. So our customer experience, at least with respect to our $17 million in inbound business, has increased significantly. So now that we've achieved that, of course, what we want to do is to start thinking about replacing some of the net new business that was being won before by salespeople, but is no longer being won by the customer service team. So we're at the point where we're ready to add a salesperson. So the important question at this juncture is, well, if we're going to add a salesperson, where should our very first salesperson be? Should they be in the field or should they be inside? Now, I'm guessing your salespeople, if you have them, or your sales managers, their instinctive response will be, well, our salespeople should be in the field because that's where selling occurs. But let's think about what would happen if we added a field-based salesperson. If we added a field-based salesperson, the day after we added them, we would come to work and we would discover that they were in the office. Now, why would they be in the office? They're meant to be a field-based salesperson. The reason they're in the office is they're trying desperately to schedule field activities. So it turns out that field salespeople don't start in the field, they start inside, and they get on the phone and they try and convince folks to let them come out in the field and visit with them. And if we watch our field salesperson work, we will discover that they spend no more than 50% of their time in the field. They probably spend significantly less than 50% of the time in the field. The rest of their time is spent inside trying to convince customers to let them go visit in the field. So most of their selling is actually performed inside, even though we think of them as an outside salesperson. Now, if we listen to that outside salesperson's calls, what we will hear is we will hear them trying to convince potential customers to go visit with them in the field. And if we listen for long enough, we will come to realize that a lot of these folks would be quite happy to have selling conversations with our salesperson on the telephone. And it's the salesperson who's lobbying to go and visit with them face to face. So what we will probably end up concluding is that our field salesperson is crawling over selling conversations they could have had if they were prepared to, in a desperate attempt to get out in the field. Because it turns out customers in almost every case would rather not have a salesperson visit with them face to face unless it's absolutely essential. And if your field salespeople are talking to folks on the telephone trying to get permission to get face to face, then they're turning away selling conversations that they could be having if they were prepared to talk to folks on the phone. But there's another reason why it probably makes sense for our first salesperson to be an inside salesperson and not an outside person, and that's the economics of inside versus outside sales. If we put a person inside in our sales team and they put a headset on and they have no distractions whatsoever, this person can comfortably have 15 or 20 selling conversations a day, perhaps more. If we take that same person and we put them in the field, even if we program field appointments for them from head office, they're in a position where they would be lucky to have 2 or 3 sales appointments a day in the field, face-to-face. And if they're in Bangalore, I don't think they could even have 2 or 3 a day, given how long it takes to catch a rickshaw from one location to the next. So the economics of sales are that inside salespeople operate at about 10 times the rate of outside salespeople. Now, the argument against inside sales is that field salespeople will say, well, I'm more effective face-to-face. And let's assume that's true. Let's assume it is true that field salespeople are more effective face-to-face. They'd actually have to be 5 to 10 times more effective for it to make sense for us to put them in the field. And I've never met a salesperson who argues that they are 5 to 10 times more effective face-to-face, because they are simply not. So if we think about this rationally, we must put our first salesperson inside. So we add a salesperson. We can assume that our first salesperson is going to be busy from day one. Why can we assume that? Well, we can assume that because we have about $17 million worth of transactions flowing through our customer service team every single day, or at least on a run rate. We're going to talk in terms of run rate. In other words, what I mean by run rate is we have about $17 million worth of transactions on a pro rata basis moving through customer service every day. Now, if we have about $17 million worth of business coming in on the wire, you can guarantee that in amongst those orders, those requests for quotes and issues, there are sales opportunities. So for example, on occasion, a prospective customer will call a customer service rep and they will say to the customer service rep, look, we're interested in transferring all of our business from a competitor to you guys because you guys are so much better than our competitors. Can I talk to you about what sort of deal, what sort of discount rate you would be prepared to provide to us if we transferred all of our business to you? Now, that's a conversation that a customer service rep can't have. The customer service rep can say, look, if you tell me what you want, I can key an order. But they can't talk to this prospect. So when this call comes in, if we have an inside salesperson, what can happen is the customer service rep can escalate this call to a salesperson. And it turns out that if we have about $17 million worth of run rate business coming in on the wire, we will have enough sales opportunities to keep a salesperson fully activated. So what that means is we now have 5 customer service reps processing about $17 million worth of inbound business. And in amongst that inbound business, we have a small number of sales opportunities. Those sales opportunities are being escalated to an inside salesperson. And it turns out we have about 8 to 10 sales opportunities a day. 8 to 10 sales opportunities is enough to keep a salesperson fully activated. So what that means is if we let it go a few weeks and we went and checked in on that salesperson, we would discover a couple of things. Number one, the salesperson is doing nothing other than having selling conversations because all these other activities are being performed by customer service. And if we're smart, we're going to say to the salesperson, we don't want you involved in orders, RFQs, or issues. We want that to be handled by customer service. In fact, we're going to have a technology divide between the two. The salesperson will operate exclusively in CRM, and the customer service team will operate exclusively in ERP. They won't even share the two technology platforms, and we won't go to any effort to integrate the two technologies because we don't want our salesperson to have any involvement whatsoever with transactions. We only want our salesperson to be involved in sales opportunities. So the first thing we notice is our salesperson does nothing other than selling conversations. The second thing that we notice is that the salesperson has accumulated a queue of about 80 sales opportunities. That the salesperson is closing about 10 opportunities a day. Now, closing doesn't mean winning, it means winning or losing. So it means, so what I mean is that the salesperson wins or loses 10 opportunities a day. That's the rate at which they process opportunities. They're sitting upstream or downstream from a queue of 80 opportunities. And it turns out that the customer service team is replenishing that queue at roughly the rate that the salesperson consumes opportunities. Now, one other thing we're going to observe about this salesperson is that they make a lot of money. If we're feeding this salesperson about 10 opportunities a day, they're probably winning 2 or 3 of them a day. And as a consequence, we're going to observe that this person is probably generating about 5 times their payroll cost in contribution margin. So this person is enormously profitable. So when our HR department finds us another team member to add to our growing team here, the smart thing to do is to add another inside salesperson. Because if this first inside salesperson is so profitable, it obviously makes sense to see if we can get away with adding a second one. Now, when we add a second salesperson, inside salesperson, we have a problem. Where our first inside salesperson is concerned, the customer service team provides enough sales opportunities to keep their queue full. But with $17 million worth of run rate business, we don't have quite enough opportunities to keep the second inside salesperson's queue full. So we have a couple of choices here. We could say to the inside salesperson, look, we would like you when you're not busy to do some prospecting. But that doesn't make sense, because prospecting, if you think about it, involves researching to find people to talk to. And that activity is quite different from selling conversations. And we would much rather have our salesperson focusing on selling than performing some dissimilar activity. The other thing that we might consider briefly is sending our inside salesperson into the field. But that doesn't make any sense either. If we send them into the field, they don't automatically find people to talk to. What they discover when they go into the field is they have to come back from the field to pick up the phone to make calls. So they essentially end up being back inside again. So what we need to grapple with at this point in time is that we need to figure out how to generate sales opportunities for salespeople so that salespeople can focus on selling conversations. And our advice here is to go to the marketing department and to say to the marketing department, look, we need 2 people from the marketing department who are going to focus exclusively on the generation of sales opportunities for salespeople. Now, in its most fundamental sense, this group, I'm going to call it promotions. It's a subset of marketing. This group consists of a campaign coordinator and a research analyst. The campaign coordinator is a person who's responsible for replenishing salespeople's opportunity queues every single day. So every single morning, the campaign coordinator comes to work. They check the status of the salespeople's queues. And if the salespeople's queues have fewer than 80 opportunities in them, they top them up so that by the time the salespeople get to work, those salespeople each have 80 opportunities in queue. Because we understand the maths already. We understand that if our inside salespeople start each day with 80 opportunities in queue, they will be able to have about 20 selling conversations a day. And the result of those 20 selling conversations is that they will close 10 opportunities each. Maybe they lose 7 and win 3. Maybe they lose 8 and win 2. It really doesn't matter. But the throughput of opportunities will be about 10 a day. So the primary responsibility of the campaign coordinator must be to replenish those opportunities daily. Now, if we think about it in its most simple sense, there are 2 parts to generating sales opportunities. The first part is we need to come up with a proposition. The second part is we need to find a list of people to present the proposition to. It's the job of the research analyst to build lists of prospects. And it's the job of the campaign coordinator to come up with propositions to present to the marketplace. So in its most simple form, the campaign coordinator's job consists of coming up with campaigns where a campaign specifies who we want to talk to about what particular proposition. And in its most simple form, what's going to happen is that the campaign coordinator is simply going to initiate conversations on behalf of the salespeople by pushing sales opportunities to them each morning and by simultaneously sending a pre-approach email on the salespeople's behalf, on the behalf of each salesperson, initiating the selling conversation that the marketing team would like the salesperson to have. So each morning when one of our salespeople come to work, they discover that their opportunity queues have been replenished. They discover that 10 opportunities have been created for them. So when they go to their opportunity list in CRM, they can see that there are 10 new opportunities that have been added to that list every day. And they can see when they check that an email has been sent on their behalf with their signature at the bottom, initiating a conversation. And what that means is during the first couple of hours of the salesperson's day, they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to follow up on each of those emails. And they're going to continue the conversation that was initiated on their behalf by the campaign coordinator. And this is how a good, productive inside sales team should be structured. Now, the consequence of this is that we now have a team of 2, and let's assume we add 1 more. I think 3 would be a healthy number. We're going to assume that we rapidly get to a team of 3 inside salespeople, collectively having 60 selling conversations a day. So now we have $17 million in run rate business, and we have 60 selling conversations a day, which is almost certainly going to cause our business to grow at a faster rate than it was growing previously. At this point, it's probably worth stopping and reflecting on the fact that not only today do we have better customer service than we had previously, but we have significantly more sales activity than we had previously, and we have fewer people in the organization today than we had previously. Now, some of you may be panicking, thinking, well, we don't have anyone at all in the field. There are some critical field activities. And yes, you're right, there are some critical field activities. If we got to this point, we would discover that there are some activities that we must perform in the field. But if we looked at those activities, what we would discover is that most of those activities, almost all of those activities, are not selling conversations. What we're going to discover is most of them are actually technical in nature. What we're going to discover is on those occasions where we critically need to have someone go visit with a customer, those visits that couldn't be performed in a video conference like this Zoom call that we're in now, what we're going to discover is that most of those activities are technical in nature. The reason a salesperson has to go and physically visit a customer is because we need to walk through their plant, because we need to run some user training, because we need to do a demonstration. And if we look at the tasks that do need to be performed face-to-face, virtually all of those tasks are technical in nature. So what we're going to do is, rather than adding a field salesperson, we're going to add what we call a field specialist. A field specialist is a person who comes from a technical background, who understands customers' commercial realities. In other words, they are friendly to what sales is trying to achieve, but they're primarily a technical person. And we call them a field specialist because their specialty is being in the field. In other words, they run around in the field and perform whatever tasks genuinely need to be performed in the field in support of the inside sales team. And what we will probably discover is, if we have a team of 3 inside salespeople, that in most geographies, 1 field specialist could support that team of 3 salespeople. Now, if you're in a large geographical area like the States, you might say, well, we're going to have 1 field specialist on the East Coast, 1 of them on the West Coast. But certainly our US customers, you know, with a land mass of this size, a population of 3 million people, I know it's a lot smaller in India, what they will typically conclude is that an organization of this size that sells nationally will need 2 field specialists, and the only reason we need 2 is to minimize the travel. So now we're in a situation where most sales transactions are being prosecuted entirely from inside, and we're simply pushing discrete field technical tasks to a field specialist. Now, the only exception where field activities are concerned is major deals. Now, we may find ourselves in a situation where there is the occasional $1 million deal that does genuinely need field sales presentations. In other words, there's a requirement for someone to go and do a formal presentation to a boardroom full of executives. So if we're big enough to find ourselves in a situation where we have a regular requirement for these kind of field presentations, we might choose to add a business development manager. I would say a business that does about $20 million in sales is probably not big enough to justify this. So what we would instead recommend is that the organization's chief executive goes and does these meetings themselves. And to make this possible, we would recommend that we get for the chief executive an executive assistant. But if we pretend for a moment that this business was a little bit bigger, what we would do is we would have a business development manager who spends most of their time in the field doing high value field meetings. Practically, in the States at least, what typically happens is that these would be expensive enterprise salespeople. So where a typical salesperson might earn $100,000 a year, these salespeople might earn $180,000 to $200,000 a year. They would be experienced, capable enterprise salespeople. They would spend most of their time in the field, and they would probably work 1 day a week doing video conferences from a home office, and they'd spend the rest of the time in the field. And we would always partner them up with what we call a business development coordinator. Now, this person is essentially an executive assistant. This person is similar to an inside salesperson in that they own the queue of opportunities and they push field appointments to salespeople. So they're like an inside salesperson in that they're responsible for the queue of opportunities. They're similar in that they sit inside, not outside. But instead of performing critical selling conversations themselves, they push the critical selling conversations to a BDM. Now, in a typical organization, what we would find is probably 90% of sales opportunities would be prosecuted by the inside sales team. But every now and again, the inside sales team would stumble across an enterprise opportunity. It might be that we're trying to sell vendor managed inventory, or we're trying to sell $1 million preferred supplier agreement or something to a customer. And those opportunities, and only those opportunities, would be escalated to the business development team consisting of the BDC and the BDM. So what I've done here is I've painted a picture for you of a new approach to designing a sales function. I suspect that if you go through this exercise for your organization, you will end up discovering that even with the addition of the BDC and the BDM and the field specialist, this model, once we've completed it for your organization, will actually have fewer people in it than you have in your organization today. And I think if you think about it, it's easy to see that this model will result in a significant improvement in your quality of customer care. It'll result in a significant improvement in sales activity. And to the extent that you have occasional enterprise opportunities, it will result in you taking your very, very best salesperson and having them focus exclusively on enterprise opportunities, which should improve your win rate where major deals are concerned as well. So I think on almost every possible conceivable vector, we've improved the performance of your sales function just by rethinking two traditional assumptions that used to be correct in the past but are no longer correct today. So there you have it. Shiva, it's over to you.
Thanks a lot for the presentation, Justin. I think it's sort of clubbed your 20 years of experience and together running sales teams and working in different companies and running your own consulting agency right now. So let me just share my screen and walk the attendees through the rest of the webinar. Just give me 1 second. Justin, can you stop sharing?
Yes, sorry, let me click. There we go.
Yeah. Justin, can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Yeah. So guys, now Justin has given us such an interesting perspective on why the current sales process is broken and how you could re-engineer your sales process to reduce costs and ultimately boost sales volumes. Now, I'm quite sure that the question you have in your mind right now is how can you get started with your company? So, I'm sure that it will be helpful to grab a copy of Justin's book and probably reach out to him or his team members, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you out. In addition to that, we also believe that you need tools to actually complement the effort you're putting in restructuring your sales team or just performing better. As Justin said, for the new sales model to work, your different teams need to be in sync. Your sales, support, engineering, and your customer and your marketing teams. In addition to that, you also need tools that helps you schedule appointments with these without to and fro emails. And now, since this is a collaborative process where you're working with multiple teams to get and achieve your sales numbers, there's a chance that you might, a few deals might slip and they might leak. So you need a tool that plugs these leaks so that you don't ever let a deal slip through the crack. Now, we believe that Vtiger has a tool for that. Now, Vtiger One is a tool that can be used by sales, marketing, and support teams. So it's a single unified CRM that helps all the three teams to work together and deliver outstanding customer experiences. So the best part about this is all your customer information is in a single place, and it really gives you a holistic view of the customer and doesn't really make you switch between multiple applications for customer information. Now, the advantage of having one single tool is, as I said, it gives you one view of the customer and also gives you improved insights because multiple teams are using this, and where you can actually track the lead as it flows through different parts of the funnel. And since three different teams are using it, you can actually have expanded automation than just your sales and support team using different applications. And ultimately, having all the three teams come together in a single tool helps you collaborate much more seamlessly. You can start on a free 15-day trial by going on to the link you can see on the screen right now. It doesn't require a credit card. You can just sign up from your personal or your professional ID and explore the CRM. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to me over an email. And I'll also share Justin's contact details later on in the follow-up email along with the webinar recording. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to him as well. I think now, guys, we're just switching to the Q&A section. So Justin, so we'll just field a couple of questions, and yeah, I think let's get started with the Q&A.
Sorry, Shiva, are you asking questions?
Yeah, no, I'm waiting for questions from the panel, from the attendees.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let me just seed the conversation with a common. Is there any certification for learners? Do you want to answer that one, Shiva? Is there any certification?
Well, I think they're probably referring to you. They probably want to come to you for classes. So.
Oh, okay. So no, we don't have classes. We do though have a video short course. So if you purchase a copy of the book on Amazon, the only place you can get the book is Amazon. If you purchase a copy of The Machine on Amazon, there is a link to a short course that extends on the content of the book with a series of video lectures. I think of the lectures I've done 4 out of 6, so there are 2 that aren't complete yet, but certainly there's a ton of value in the first 4. So if you go ahead and buy the book, definitely makes sense to sign up for the video short course.
Oh, that's nice. Looks like we've got another question. So the next question is in fintech or tech platforms. So this is a question from John, and he says that you really need field sales reps to close deals there. He's saying, is there a workaround, and can this model be applied to a fintech company?
A fintech financial technology?
Yes.
So yes, I mean, if you're in fintech, I mean, we have a number of clients in fintech that have inside sales teams. So it's not automatically true that you have to be face-to-face to sell fintech. I mean, we have a client of ours in London, and we built a big inside sales team for them, and they do fintech deals all over the world, Middle East, India, Europe, with an inside sales team. Now, if you're doing large deals, you will need to be face-to-face, but the model accommodates that because we have a field-based BDM partnered up with an internal BDC. But just don't be too quick to assume that you have to be face-to-face to close big deals. It's not necessarily the case. We have a number of clients in mining, for example, that do $1 million plus deals, and they do them primarily with an inside sales team. It's simply not true. And I think that video conferences today are so close to face-to-face meetings that here's an example. I used to, for years, say to audiences when I was presenting, Well, of course, if you're selling nuclear submarines to the US military, you have to be prepared to be face-to-face with generals. And everybody used to nod like, well, yes, this is self-evident. If you're doing a $50 million deal, you have to be face-to-face for a $500 million deal. But after one of my presentations, I had someone come up to me and they said, look, Justin, we've been selling to the military for years. We sell electrical systems into nuclear submarines. It's not the whole submarine, but it's multi-million-dollar deals. And they said to me, the generals don't want to meet with us face-to-face, and they haven't met with us face-to-face for years. Everything that we do is via video conference. And the reason for that is that if you think about complex transactions, more often than not, there are numerous parties on the buyer side that need to be involved in purchasing decisions. And oftentimes, those parties are not in the same place. And if you assume that you have to meet with them face-to-face, that means you have to schedule your meetings at a time where everyone can be in the same place. So you need multiple people from your organization. You need you and you need members of the engineering team to be in the same place. Plus, you need multiple people from the customer's organization to be in the same place. That's a scheduling nightmare. If you assume that the primary mode of communication is going to be video conferences, you will find that you schedule your meetings much, much faster. Now, if you do genuinely need to be face-to-face, that's fine, because in the model I just showed you, you have an enterprise salesperson and a field specialist, both of whom spend all of their time face-to-face to the extent that that's genuinely required.
Okay.
So the next question is, now that sales roles are identified as a team, you're insinuating that you remove commissions from the comp package and offer salary. Well, I'm not sure if I insinuated it, but that is the logical inference. And yes, you must do that. Because what we're talking about doing is transitioning from sales being the responsibility of an autonomous agent to sales being a team sport. And if you think about the rest of the organization, in the rest of the organization, each of the departments operates as a team. So marketing is a team sport, manufacturing is a team sport, finance is a team sport. And if you're looking for teamwork, then you absolutely must eliminate piece rate pay. So yes, the very first thing that we do when we work with an organization is get rid of commissions. Now that doesn't mean salespeople don't get paid well. I think if I was to survey our clients, I would discover that our clients on average pay more than their competitors on a fully loaded basis. So in other words, if you look at the salaries that our clients pay their customers and compare pay their salespeople, sorry, and compare those salaries with what competitors' salespeople earn, then you would end up discovering that on average, our clients' salespeople earn more than competitors' salespeople earn. But they get paid that money as an upfront salary rather than having to earn it as a commission.
All right.
So yes, that's necessary. And I think it's a good litmus test. If you have a VP of sales who isn't prepared to eliminate commissions, then it means they don't really understand what they're doing. Because if they truly understood what they were doing here, if they truly understood that the model that I'm describing here involves division of labor and requires teamwork, if they truly understood that, then they wouldn't be quibbling about whether or not it made sense to eliminate commissions, because it obviously does. So in other words, what I'm saying is the fundamental question here is not should salespeople be paid commissions or not. The fundamental question is, should salespeople be autonomous agents, or should we apply division of labor to the sales function? That's the question you need to focus on answering.
Okay. So Justin, moving on to another question. So this is from John, and he says that if you're launching in a new country with a new product, do you still think video conferencing is enough, or do you think you need field sales people?
Well, it depends on the new country. If you're launching in a country where there aren't telephones, or there isn't, or where I remember spending some time with a large manufacturer of fats, oils, and lipids in Ecuador, and some of their customers operated small convenience stores, like 7-Elevens, and the owners of these stores. They weren't online, and they ignored the phone most of the time because they were serving customers. And the reality is, if they wanted to sell to those people, they had to go face to face. So it depends on the sophistication of the market. If you're trying to launch in a third world country where people aren't online, where people aren't sitting in front of their computers, then yeah, you may have to get face to face with them. But if you're trying to launch in the US or in the UK or in Australia or in any country where the people who you're trying to sell to are online, in front of their computers, used to having video conferences, then no, you probably shouldn't be launching face to face. Now, there may be other reasons why you may want to build a local presence. So, I'll give you an example. We've just finished an engagement with a technology company that's based in Australia, and they sell in 3 locations primarily: North America, the UK, and in Europe and Australia. And we convinced them to basically build their sales team in the US. And the reason we did that is it's easier to sell into the US if you have people with American accents on the telephone. It's very hard to sell into the US if you have people with Australian or British accents, for 2 reasons. One is because America is one of the world's largest economies, and Americans tend to like to buy from Americans. But the other reason is that you find that folks who don't live here simply don't understand the market. And they sound a little bit strange on the phone because they don't have the affinity that's required. Now, it turns out if you build a sales team in the States, the sales team based in the States can sell comfortably to people in the UK, Europe, and North America. So for this company, what we did was we said, look, we're going to leave customer service in Australia, but we're going to build a sales team for them. So we did. We found them a premises. We recruited staff. We built them a sales team in Colorado. And that sales team in Colorado works 3 shifts. They work split shifts, I should say. And they sell into the UK, North America, and Australia from one location in Colorado. So it may be an excuse to have a team on the ground, but it isn't necessarily an excuse to be face-to-face.
Oh, perfect. So I think, Justin, we're done with the amount of time. And
excellent.
Yeah, so guys, if you have any questions, I hope you've taken down my email ID. You can write to me, and I'll also share Justin's email ID in the follow-up email. And with the recording of the entire webinar, you can always reach out to us. And again, so just summing up everything that Justin has said, it's always great to have your customer-facing teams working together. And if you're looking for a tool that does that, Vtiger is the one. You can sign up for a free trial by heading over to our website. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us.